We'll move on to the next speaker. And it's a privilege to introduce Jyothis George, who is actually the only junior to me among the presenters. I have known Jyothis during my days in John's. After getting his MBBS at St. John's, he moved to UK, where he attended post-graduation in medicine. He is currently a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians and holds a PhD from University of Oxford. He currently acts as the head of medicine at Boehringer Ingelheim cardio-diabetes portfolio. Jyothis will present on the challenges and opportunities in drug and vaccine development from Frankfurt.
Thank you, Sunil, and good evening to friends and colleagues in India, and good morning in North America and in those time zones. Thank you, Sunil, for that very kind introduction. My PhD was from Edinburgh. Given living 10 years between Scotland and England, it's very important to know facts, right, especially in the context of Brexit. I would remind, like Narayan Baliga said, Raghavan Baliga said at the beginning, that the message of staying at home and protecting our friends and families in the broader society remains relevant. And I am talking to you from the basement of my home here in Frankfurt. I would like to cover 4 areas, beginning with the impact on non-COVID drug development. This actually is often forgotten in all the drama that we see every day about COVID, right? Patients cannot travel to sites, and for many trials actually being on hold or delayed. Investigational sites are being closed, either at will or because of government restrictions like what we have in the UK. All non-essential trials are on hold in the UK, for example. But most importantly, it's probably not appreciated by all, is money is finite, resources are always finite. And when we divert money towards COVID research, that is going to divert money away from other issues in healthcare. The PubMed, if you look at it, we have more than 20,000 articles, I believe, coming out of COVID literature. And many of these relate to supportive therapies, be it the use of anticoagulation, which was already asked and answered by Professor Baliga, and also the use of appropriate oxygenation. Is it going to be invasive, non-invasive, ward flow, those sort of things. I just want to preface by saying most supportive care so far is actually based on small amounts of evidence, not really, well-powered, adequately controlled, 2 randomized controlled trials that we see. So therefore, I would focus specifically now on the next part into registration-seeking trials, or trials which are really aiming towards definitively proving or disproving a certain hypothesis. And in that realm of looking at drug candidates for COVID-19, there are 2 distinct categories that we can think about. One is repurposed drugs. These include many antiviral therapies, including the one from Gilead, and there are also HIV therapies being repurposed, as you know, and many immune modulators. You heard from Lloyd Vinson's experience about colchicine. There are many other immune modulators being used, including low-dose steroids in various contexts. Again, the safety and efficacy of these would be seen in the context of broader evidence we have in the literature, and therefore it's probably easier to interpret. But the second group of drugs, which are being specifically developed for COVID, and one example I've given you is the Alnylam Vir company specific therapy called ALNCOV. It's a RNA inhibitor specifically targeting the SARS-CoV-2 genome. These sort of medicines are being developed specifically for it, and to have sufficient safety package to support use in the clinic is going to be really important. And in here, I would particularly say we need to look for randomized controlled trial evidence. And all we have to rely on currently is many registry data. There are many weaknesses in those data, but let's wait for randomized controlled trials to come through. Sunil asked me to cover vaccine development. I know very little about vaccines myself, apart from having my office across the car park from the Oxford vaccines unit, where the current focus of world media attention is. As you know, the Oxford Trials Unit are partnering with AstraZeneca to aiming for a large vaccination program. There are many other alliances working together. GlaxoSmithKline or GSK and Sanofi are working together on an approach where GSK provides adjuvants and Sanofi the active elements. But one thing we need to absolutely be clear is, in the context of vaccine development, the safety bar is set much higher than many of the other acute treatments, simply because the target population is people like you and us, you and me, and here we are healthy. And for most of us, COVID is a mild, moderate illness with almost no sequelae. And therefore, we need to be extremely careful about the need for safety in that context. Even very infrequent side effects will be seen in high numbers in absolute terms, given the number of patients or people across the world who will need to be vaccinated. And a good reminder here would be the vaccines developed in the 70s for the swine flu threat then, which led to a relatively high number of Guillain-Barré syndrome and other things. So as much as we want to be optimistic, there are some things to be concerned about. My next slide, Sunil, talks about the reason for being optimistic here. If you look at the number of approaches being made in developing a COVID-19 vaccine, this figure from Nature shows the different approaches being from DNA, RNA to peptide-based to non-replicating viral vectors being used, and you can see a large number of them are actually being trialed. And this large pipeline coming in gives us a sense of optimism looking forward. But balancing that optimism is a dose of realism. Here is a picture from GlaxoSmithKline GSK's website, which summarizes the vaccine development timeline in average. So you can see just the preclinical part usually takes anything up to a decade, at least a year in most contexts. And then the clinical development is a few years then, and finally setting up manufacturing to a scale where we can provide billions, not millions, billions of doses in a quick turnover is going to be a huge logistical challenge, even for the might of the world's industry put together. In summary, take-home messages to all of you this evening and morning is three from my perspective. One is amidst COVID, let's not forget there is a need for many therapies to be developed and tested and launched for many more common illnesses that will have a much bigger impact on public health across the world. The second part is we need to be optimistic about drugs coming through, about vaccines coming through, but we need to temper that optimism with a cautious realization that if a safety scandal comes out of a vaccine from this field, it could affect vaccination uptake across the world in any disease, and that's bad for public health. And the last message I want to leave you with is the principle of first doing no harm, learned in our early days as medical students, remain valid even in the days of the pandemic. And our jobs as clinicians and physicians across the world is to, at first, do no harm. Thank you all.
Thanks, Jyothis. And this question from the audience is for you. What, in your honest opinion, on the pharma industry coming out with an effective RNA vaccine for this particular virus, which has mutated so rapidly in a short period of time?
Excellent. And somebody famous said, you know, when somebody talks about honest opinion, it's an interesting concept, but let me give my best bets, Sina. These RNA vaccines and others actually are focused on conserved areas of this particular virus. For example, the spike protein, the spiky bits that we see in the corona cartoon, that's largely conserved, and therefore, so far, we've not seen any impact that could affect the vaccine there, right? But your concern is absolutely valid, and a large mutation which affects immunogenicity could easily be threatening our effort. But so far, there is no evidence of that happening.
Thank you, Jyothis.